Hello and welcome to this episode of the Game Plan podcast by College Baseball Advisors. On the Game Plan, we basically meet awesome baseball people and find out about their journey up till the present and learn a lot about their experiences, what they went through as a player, as a coach, and can help us in our development and recruiting, and of course, hopefully in life as well. I'm your host, Wayne Mazzone. I coached college baseball 30 years and now run College Baseball Advisors. For more information about what I do, please visit my website, collegebaseballadvisor.com. In addition, I created this cool, simple, manageable roadmap that anyone can get for free that can kind of help with the stress and overwhelm and confusion on recruiting. If you go to the website go.collegebaseballadvisor.com/roadmap, all you do is put your email in and you can get the paper sent to your inbox for free. Today's episode was a really fun one. Tracy Smith, head baseball coach at Michigan. He and I met at the Mohegan Sun Coaches Convention in January. Really good guy, a regular guy. That's kind of what's great. You get to that level, Michigan head coach. He's just a regular guy, loves talking baseball, loves talking about his life and how it's, the journey he's been through. So we covered a lot of stuff growing up in Indiana. Really, of course, in Indiana, you play basketball. Thought he was going to possibly play college basketball. Wound up going to Miami of Ohio, where he entered as a shortstop and then basically transitioned to pitcher. Was drafted twice by the Cubs. Started his college as a pro career, excuse me, as a pitcher, and then wound up being a position player. And he tells that story. I don't know if those kind of things happen these days, but it was really neat to hear about that. After his playing career, he coached basketball first, then baseball at the junior college level, and then got his first job as a hitting coach at Miami of Ohio, his alma mater. Stayed there until he became the pitching coach at Indiana, then went back to Miami of Ohio as the head coach and really helped really grow that program. Went from a basic field to building a great place and had some great season, which led to then getting the job at Indiana, where kind of the same thing. He had to start over a program that was at the bottom of the conference and really build them. And ultimately in 2013, even went to the College World Series with Indiana. And then he talked about his time at Arizona State, his first move to the sun, if you will, to baseball, in the way that a good part of the country plays it, but that he hadn't been used to, and learning experiences from there, a position where ultimately he got let go of, but has no regrets other than maybe he should have just been more of himself, which, you can see how comfortable he is in his shoes now as a person and as the head coach at Michigan. We talked a little bit about sort of the modern baseball world, a little bit about pushing the season back, which is gaining some steam, and talked about social media, a lot of things that was really enjoyable. So I hope you really have a good time with this podcast as I did. So without further delay, here's my conversation with Tracy Smith, head baseball coach at University of Michigan. So, Coach, first and foremost, thank you for spending time with me. I know in your position, we were just talking before I hit record, like today's a day is the Zooms for you, and you had a cool experience last night. Maybe we talk about it, maybe we don't, where you're out doing, things that are part of this job. So, especially with the season coming up, to hang with me for a little bit is much appreciated. So, first off, thank you.
Well, no, hey, we're talking baseball and having a good time, so this is easy.
It should be easy. Just
That's right.
schedule, just getting it in the schedule. But I'm sure you've been on many podcasts, and people always want to talk about all the current things going on, and I do too. But I want to know more about Tracy Smith, like just growing up. So obviously, you were a baseball guy. Were you playing a bunch of sports when you were growing up and at the junior high school age?
Yeah, I mean, so I would say traditional because it used to be not so traditional anymore, but it was
Right.
the football, basketball, baseball, eventually evolved into cross country basketball and baseball. But I grew up in the state of Indiana, so if I didn't have a basketball in my hand, there was something wrong with me. And actually, I thought I wanted to be a college basketball player. I had some small school offers, but as fate would have it, here we are in baseball. But yeah, I played them all like everybody else at that time, kind of did that stuff. So
Yeah, I mean, even at your age now, you and I met at Mohegan. I mean, you're still pretty fit. You look like you could hoop it up a little. Do you ever get out on the court, or you say
well, it,
forget that?
it's probably the last time some fantasy basketball cans. Funny story with that. Again, I used to play a little bit, and the guys were going to have there's a basketball facility down close to our thing, and the coaches were going. I got some younger guys on staff, and they're like, "Hey, we're going to go play some hoops." And I'm like, "Well, hey, I'll pop in." And they have a weight thing in there. And as I'm walking by the court, as I walk in, they're playing and they're sweating and whatever. They're like, "Hey, Skip, want to join?" And I threw out the thing. I was like, "Nah, man, that's like an Achilles ready to happen." And so I go and lift a little bit. Well, 20 minutes later, they come over. My pitching coach blew his Achilles. So,
Unbelievable. How
so
long ago was this?
this was right at I mean, we were just getting ready to start fall ball. So he had the surgery and he's on that little wheelie thing, the entire. So I don't know if I threw it into the universe or I was just, and when we get our age, man, that's like my nightmare is at Achilles.
No, it's true. And there's at our ages ways to stay fit without having to get on a basketball court, right?
There's,
Um,
there's
yeah,
walking, right?
exactly. So you talked about possibility you were going to play basketball maybe in college. When did it get to the point where A, you knew it was baseball, and B, did you get recruited? I mean, in our generation, is in terms of being recruited was literally night and day difference. So just talk about what got you to Miami.
Yeah, it's so funny when you talk to people now about that process then. You're right. It's like they're looking at you like you've got three heads. Or like, wait a
Totally.
minute, you did what?
Right.
Um, and I was from a small town, small community, and back then it was Legion baseball,
Yep.
was what we did in the state of Indiana. And ironically, though, like I was from a really, really tiny community. Our towns, and when I say tiny, I was 1,800 people is the town that I grew up in. We all kind of fed in. There were a handful of towns that fed into one post 280, but interestingly enough, on that post 280 team in that little area, like three people went on to play professional baseball,
Wow.
which was actually pretty cool. But so yeah, I played basketball. But like I tell a lot of the kids that I'm recruiting, there's a lot more that goes into, I think, the decision than just the athletic piece. And I was always one, like I wanted to go to a big school. And in other words, a school that offered football,
Right.
offered a basketball, whatever it was. And so on the basketball side, I was getting smaller Division II offers on that. I liked baseball. I wouldn't sit here honestly today and say that I loved it. I liked it. I was pretty good at it or whatever, but I did not make a college decision to go to Miami until July after my senior year.
Goodness.
Think about that, in
Yeah.
today's and it was just by chance. I played in the Indiana All-Star game, and the coach saw me, and I went down on a visit and fell in love with it. And that's kind of how I ended up there, passed on the D2 basketball stuff. And maybe we'll get to this, but people don't know my first coaching job in college was basketball.
Wow.
Yeah, so I still,
That's one of the cool parts I like about doing these. Like I had on earlier this week, Tyler Latore from Pepperdine. I know you're playing Pepperdine, and he basically went to UC Davis and tried out with 120 kids. Thought he was not going to make it. Makes the team. Obviously, turns out to be pretty good. Has a minor league career, etc. And now he's coaching. But like he's like, I love football, man. So it is funny. Maybe with your background and even your kids that are coach, like maybe if it wasn't baseball, maybe you would have just been coaching hoops or football, or maybe you're built to coach and just baseball became the path.
well, it was because even playing, like I didn't have this like life path of saying, hey, I'm gonna coach. I really didn't, and it was like through this accidental. Once the playing career was over, I had an education background and the methods courses and stuff like that. I thought I wanted to teach, and then I thought I wanted to be in administration, and kind of fell into a little bit of a coaching job on the basketball side. But it was at that moment that I'm like, okay, I don't know what I want to do, but I know that I want to be around like younger people and still active in sport. And that was the coaching bug for me, but it wasn't, hey, I'm going to be a coach someday. I was like the farthest. I still run into my teammates today, college teammates that are like, dude, you're like the last person I would have thought would ever coach.
I mean, that's actually really funny that the guys who knew you best. But so, you obviously have a good career in college. You get drafted, you play a few years in the minors, and then the first gig is basketball. I mean, we may have talked about this at Mohegan, but I don't remember. So how did that come about?
So my mentor in coaching is my father-in-law, and I had a lot that contributed, but he was kind of the one at those formative. I'm 18, 19, 20 years old. I dated his daughter, through college, all of that. But he was an AD and director of student affairs at a branch campus of Miami University. And when I would come back in the off seasons, like I would coach, and it's the level's not even junior college. It's a branch campus. And so I'd always love telling that story because even when I talk about today about kids finding a spot to play, like there's somewhere for kids to play after high school. And I know that because I've done it actually at the lowest level you could ever do it at. And
Right.
so I started coaching there in the off season and coached basketball, loved it. I loved, basketball for me. It's like there's the quick adjustments, and baseball, it's a little slower. But when I
Right.
stopped playing, then I went back and started the baseball program at that institution. But I coached basketball for 3 seasons, and the gentleman that I worked with, Jimmy Sliger, to this, everyone will ask me like, "Hey, who influenced you as coaching?" I go, "You know what? It's going to be somebody that you've never heard
Right.
of, because he was a guy that commanded unbelievable respect, but he never raised his voice." Now, I wish I could be more like Jimmy Sliger, and that, but I always loved that about him. But then being, in some odd sense, like your father-in-law, kind of being that coaching, ear, and things that he would say to me over the years in that still stick with me to this day that I use. So I kind of grew up in this little cocoon of this small, tiny branch campus thing that truly not doing a lot differently than we're doing at every other place that I've coached, because coaching is coaching. I don't care what level you're at.
So you mentioned in there, you started the baseball program there?
Mhm.
Wow. So now were you coaching two thing? Were you coaching basketball
Well,
and
so I
baseball at some
stopped
point?
the basketball thing and did this more on the full time. And then I had played at Miami, and part of, just scheduling, my old coach, did us a favor because we were a branch campus, the main campus of Miami. And so we would play them. And just one time after, I just remember like one time after a game, I just went up to him and said, "Coach, if you ever have an opening on the staff, like I think I would love, an opportunity to coach at Miami someday." And then sure enough, a year later, that happened. And that's really kind of how I got jump started in Division I coaching, was just through my coach giving me a chance, my college coach giving me a
That so
chance.
right. So that was the coach that you played for, right? So you right. And what was your what through college in the minors? What was your primary position?
Well, that's a whole nother. So
Okay. See, I
well,
ask good
no,
questions.
yeah. So I went to college as a shortstop, and I actually started my freshman year. And then an individual came in my sophomore year, a good friend of mine, Tim Naring, who's now upper level executive with the Yankees. But Tim eventually became a starting shortstop for the Boston Red Sox. But Tim put me to the bench my sophomore year. And, and I remember saying to my coach, and it's funny how all of these things come full circle. Like I remember saying to my coach, is like, "I just want to get back on the field again." I said, "Can I pitch?" And I'll never forget this. And I don't mean this in a dry, but but he goes, "Oh, I've seen you pitch," meaning like there's no way you could do it.
Right, right,
You know?
right, right.
So what I did is I started throwing to all of our guys after practice. And because I wanted to get on the field. I played as a freshman. I'm not playing now and feel, and that's tough, as you know, and
Very
most.
much so.
And so rolls around junior year, I'm still like, I don't know what's going to happen. And interestingly enough, we're playing Michigan down in Texas one, and I finally got to the point where he's like, "You know what? He's doing okay." So I was pitching in practice now, but he still hadn't given me the ball. Well, we're in Texas. We're facing, I think Michigan was number 5 at the time. Throws me the baseball and says, "You're getting your first start." And I was starting against Jim Abbott, and 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 then kind of the rest is history. So I mean, I actually had some decent success on the mound or whatever. But what was funny, so I get drafted my junior year by the Cubs, which I grew up a Cubs fan in small town Kentland.
Yep.
Got a really bad car accident out east in summer ball, so I couldn't sign. So I went back to Miami, finished my degree, but got drafted again by the Cubs. And while we're speaking of that, how kids have no idea. Like I didn't know I got drafted. Back in those days, someone called you the next day and said, "Oh, hey, did you see you got drafted?" I was like, "Oh, you know." So I go to the Cubs as a pitcher. First season in pro ball, through weird circumstances, kids getting sent home, guys injuries, whatever, we lose all of our shortstops. So they're sitting around one day when they go, "Has anybody ever played infield before?" And I went,
Oh my
"Man."
God.
2 weeks. So a week later, I take batting practice that night. So now I finish the shortstop. I go back to spring training next year. I didn't know I was going back as a pitcher or whatever, but I ended my career as an infielder. So I say to people, I went to college as a infielder, ended as a pitcher with the Pro Bowl as a pitcher, but ended as a position player. And interestingly enough, my last year, my last game I ever played in my life competitively, didn't know it at the time that it was my last game.
Right.
But I played all 9 positions.
Really?
Yeah, yeah. And I jokingly said I did everything in there. I got an RBI, got a base hit, I got on the mound, made an error. But yeah, just and I kind of share that story because back to the comment of the coach saying to me, I've seen you pitch. Like if even in my current state, I had actually just had this happen like last week. An individual's not what we think or whatever, and they come to me with like, hey, I want to try. I'm really, and I'll say, you know what, I'm gonna let you try that because I remember the day that my college coach kind of said, you can't do this, and yet you know, did it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's why I shared that story.
No, it's great because that reminds me of something way back when in the early 2000s. I'm coaching Legion ball. There's not even enough kids for like make cuts. This kid comes, he's a lefty pitcher. He looked like almost like spastic the way he pitched, right? I'm like, oh my God, right? Now this was wood bat and Legion ball. This team went 7-21, and he was 6-1. All he did was throw a fastball low and away. He got people out on two swings. The outfield played deep. So, right now, of course, we're talking different level at Michigan, but I remember something Butch Thompson told me, which was people can get better. Sometimes we see a kid and we judge he's can't, but they can get better. And then, right, you never know it's not every kid that's going to be able to do that, but if you don't give them a shot, who knows if they'll be able to
Right.
do it, right?
And why would we ever, if an individual can do that, why would you ever cut off your nose, to spite your face? Like,
Yeah.
why? It's funny you said Butch. He was one of my Zooms today.
Oh, he was. Oh, very funny. So what's interesting though, too, and the reason I asked you about the position is, I see in my notes kind of like at Miami, you were the hitting guy when you first started at there. And then when you go over to Indiana, now you're the pitching guy, right? It's not, I mean, in this day and age, kind of unheard. It still happens a little, but not, so talk about that. Yeah, I see. I raised the eyebrow. So go ahead.
Well, I'm laughing because, I'm almost embarrassed. I'll say it publicly, but it's like, so back to my recruiting out of high school. I'm an Indiana guy. I had actually gone on a visit to Indiana and had committed there, or said I'm coming, one of those deals. Well, then I told you, then the thing happened with Miami in July and whatever. Well, I never called Coach Morgan back to tell him I wasn't coming. Now here I'm a immature 18-year-old or whatever. So now fast forward to I'm at Miami. There's a pitching job at Indiana, and so now I got to apply for this job. And I'm like, God, I hope he doesn't remember the kid that never called him back. But even on that, like I hadn't had a lot of the background. It's just so different back then than now of the
Yes,
pitching thing. And I read every book that I could get my hands on the pitching because I hadn't been a pitching coach. And
right.
so I kind of, I don't want to say, fudge, but I went in and kind of presented myself as this pitching coach. But what it taught me, and this was one of my father-in-law sayings again, he would always say this. He's like, you know what? You hire good people and you can teach them anything.
Right.
And, well, again, I didn't bring a pitching coach resume to Indiana. What I did bring was a good work ethic, and I was willing to try and do different things or whatever. And we had, at that time, Indiana hadn't won a lot, and
Yeah.
we won the Big Ten tournament my second year there. Did some really good things statistically on the pitching side in the Big Ten that hadn't been done, and I was very proud of that. And so I kind of have kept that like in my back pocket throughout my career because at Arizona State, I actually had to let a pitching coach go in the middle of the season, and everybody's like, "Well, what are you gonna do?" And I'm like, "Well, I'm gonna take him over." "Oh, well, you're not a pitching coach." I think we'll be okay.
Right.
You
Right.
know,
Yeah, it's interesting, and it's cool to talk to you in a way because you lived the era that was very different, and in many ways it's the same, but in many ways it's different, right? There are people getting minor league pitching coach jobs that didn't pitch, but they know how to read a track man and do data, and there's merit. I think there's merit to all sides of these
right?
things, but um, obviously now you go back to Miami, where you played, where you had coach, you get the head coaching job. Um, Taken over there, was the learning curve? Was it a big learning curve
It
running a
was,
program for the first
yeah,
time?
well, I laugh and I go back to, when I was there, there was that comfort level of, you're interviewing, and I'm going to go back like as the assistant piece, even like
Right,
work
right,
my former head coach. It was interesting because I didn't know what I didn't know about college baseball. All I had seen was Miami. I'd seen my
right.
coach. Then I'm assistant for him for 2 years. I mean, honestly, we didn't do a lot, but in my mind, I'm thinking, oh, this is college baseball. This is pretty simple and whatever. So I go to Indiana, worked as an assistant for someone that he just based Bob Morgan, very successful, but turned over the reins to me and did everything. And it was like, wait a minute, I thought it was this,
Right.
where we really didn't do anything. Then I go in this. So now going back to Miami, and I'll never forget, and Eric Hyman was the AD there at the time. Eric went on to be an AD in the SEC and whatever, tremendous individual. But he's like, do you think you'd like to be the, and I said yes, like before he made the offer. And then I'm like, God, I was so green because there went my leverage for salary, right?
Right.
But it still was very comfortable for me because I was going back to a place that I was very familiar. I didn't know Eric Hyman, but I knew everybody at
Yeah,
Miami,
right, right.
So, and at the time, and you may remember, I don't know if you remember Midland baseball with Joe Hayden, and Midland baseball
Yeah,
Johnny Mack was like the standard. I mean, Barry Larkin, Griffey Jr., all those guys play. And Mr. Hayden was very instrumental in helping me get that job.
hmm,
And so while I did interview, it didn't feel like an interview because I was going back talking to old friends.
right,
But the learning curve for me, um, because we had taken that program over, I think Miami had finished last in the MAC for the last years, and being there as a graduate of that place, a lot of pride, but it was just like, and that's where for me, when I have young assistants now, and there's this tendency sometimes they all want, the instant, like I want to be, I go, dude, it's like the mail room. I felt like I started in the mail room at Miami. I mean, I'm picking weeds off of the infield, I'm
yeah,
hand doing, we did everything, which I'd love that. I would never skip that step. And I would tell guys, don't ever skip that step
right,
because that's where you learn to appreciate everything you have. And then we eventually built that into a very successful program and a lot of pride in that. We sent guys out to the Cape from Miami that were the Cape Cod Pitcher of the Year. We would go down and open in the SEC teams and beat them 2 out of 3. And so I was very proud of going back and building. We built a stadium, I joke because I kind of had a pattern there. Like I was at Miami for 9 years as a head coach. We had a glorified high school field for 7 years. We got the stadium for 2, and then I left and moved on for another job.
right. Um, I know in your last year there, you guys had a ridiculous, season. I mean, it was like a 45 and 18 year. Obviously, that that coming off that year, what led you to either A, get the Indiana art job, or B, say it's time to now go
It
on,
was
or
the it was the opportunity to leave at that point, but I knew it was that was kind of my first, and I try to advise guys on this stuff too when they ask me about when they should leave and
Mhm.
whatever. I I knew we had 40 some wins coming back. Like that starting rotation. I mean, I walked away from there were umpteen big leaguers on that team, eventual big leaguers on that team, going to a job again where it's a glorified, we just built a stadium. We'd won 40 some baseball games. I'm leaving this staff of whatever to go to a place that was finishing last in the Big Ten when everybody on the planet said, do not take the Indiana job. You can't win there, except one individual, Bob Todd, who was at Ohio State at the time. And I don't know how much you've followed the Midwest baseball at the time, but back in that era, Bob Todd was the standard. I mean, they were hosting and going to super
Right.
regionals all the time. And I'll never forget him saying that. I'm like, well, why? He goes, Tracy, he goes, Indiana University is the southernmost school in the big. He goes, that place is a sleeping giant.
Mm.
And and I, and I would say I probably would have taken it anyway, but that little nudging coming from, to me, the godfather of Midwest baseball, when literally everybody was saying, why would you ever leave your alma mater? You're gonna, I just think I'm wired, and I encourage people to like keep trying to challenge yourself and take new steps. And so yeah, going from that and then going back to a cellar dweller again and having to do it all over again.
So I'll ask you this. Obviously, at Miami, you really got the program in a great direction at Indiana. Same thing. I mean, you had was it 2013, the World Series run? So was that a combination of your leadership coaching style? Was that a combination of recruiting legit kids or both?
I, I mean, probably both. I mean, we didn't have, some of the factors that we have now. I mean, I even go back to that Miami team, back to like if that team at a Mid-American level, it wouldn't have happened because those kids would have been poached
Yeah,
and paid for, and there just wasn't a lot of that going on at that time. The Indiana thing, we had to roll the sleeves up again. But we had a blueprint, like we had which we took the blueprint. I learned a lot from the Miami 9 years of taking it literally from last place to first place, which is exactly what we were going to have to do again at Indiana. But we were doing it in a better conference because back at that time too, Mid-American Conference, and it's still a little bit was a one bid league. And I can
right.
remember we had made the championship game to the conference tournament 6 out of the 9 years that I was there, and I think we won it twice. But I have this vivid memory of walking back to the parking lot with my wife going, I'm not doing this anymore. Like, I know we're better than, we're a top 25 team, but because we're in this league, it all comes down to getting lucky and playing well on one weekend.
Totally.
Tournament.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I talked to Chris Marks at Campbell when I believe he was there with Justin Hare. They had a year where they won 49 games and
Yep.
did not get a bid, right? So that, yeah, that could be, you're totally right. That could be really frustrating. You know, you have the club, but man, if things don't line up the right on a conference weekend and someone's got a legit arm or saves an arm, there it goes, right?
And everybody has an ace, you know.
Everybody has an ace. Exactly.
Well, and so that led to, even at that time, though, the Big Ten still wasn't what it is now, but at least there was the chance for the multi. If you felt like you're doing your job and you just maybe you tripped up in a tournament, you still had a chance to play in the postseason. So,
So your obviously next move is Arizona State. It's now, if I'm reading this right, kind of the first time my guy Tracy's in the sun now. You're down south. You're in a different world baseball wise, right? Year-round baseball. Was that intriguing and obviously taking over this storied program? Is that what led to
well,
the
it was
move?
funny because my youngest was going through the recruiting process at that time in football. And so traveling around, this number pops up on my phone that I didn't recognize. Now, the difference between the Miami and the Indiana, because even in Indiana, going back and being the head coach, I had been an assistant there for 2 years. So I
Right.
knew that place, knew the people.
Yes.
Um, where this one was different was I didn't know anybody.
Right.
Like there was no call. I didn't reach out to Arizona State. I mean, they reached out to me. Um, I tell people at the time, I mean, I walked away. I'm Indiana born and bred. I mean, we had Kyle Schwarber in that, and we were better in 14. We had a good team. Same scenario, like knowing what you've got. I was comfortable. We had just built a new stadium at a 9 year contract, walked away from a 9 year contract, but it goes back to that again in life. Like we can choose to be comfortable or we can challenge ourselves to see, because it was like for me, Miami to Indiana. All right, big boy, you've done it at Miami in the MAC. Can you go do it in the Big Ten? And I got that same thing. It's like, all right, big boy, you did it in the Big Ten. Now let's go see if you can do it somewhere outside your comfort zone. And it was funny when I got offered the job, it literally went like this, when it was like, okay, here, we're going to offer you the job, but you have, and I was naive. I didn't get that place still at that
Mm,
time. Like you got 24 hours to decide.
mm.
And people are like, man, I said, you know what though? But what I learned about deadlines, it's like we as people will put stuff off as long as we can. Anyway, what that 24-hour deadline did is it made me prioritize the things in my life personally and professionally in that time period. And I took it to 23 hours and 45 minutes, but it just made you prioritize. So whether the deadline was 24 hours or 2 weeks, if you'd said 2 weeks, I probably would have taken 2 weeks.
Right.
But I made a decision to do it. It was one, I get asked that question all the time. Do you regret leaving Indiana? And the absolute answer to that question is no, not even close. I loved it. It's not speaking against Indiana,
Right.
but I just look at life as you take opportunities. There's never a good time. That's my father-in-law again. Like there's
Yeah.
never a good time for someone to take another job or move on. And I love that because it was going out into something totally unknown. As you said, I was a Midwest guy, always indoors. I remember that first year walking around and oh my God, people actually have sun and we can practice out. If we went indoors out there, it was to go into an air conditioned facility to get out of the heat. And
Exactly.
so, yeah, loved it.
Yeah, I mean it's clearly a different now pressure, right? Whereas these other places, more or less, you're the hero there. Here at Arizona State, seems from the outside looking in, it's a little more cutthroat where you got to produce result. Like, did it change the joy of coaching, or was it? You don't seem like a guy who looks back, and you seem like you just attack each day. So how did you take that challenge? I guess I'll
Now
ask.
sitting back and looking at it, was it different? I didn't know at the time because I was going in, and when I was at the, where we met at the Mohegan Sun, I mean, I was going into that job still going to be Tracy Smith because I'm
Yeah,
like, the formula has worked the way that it's been. I'm the small town guy. I do it a certain way. I am who I am. I'm accessible. And I remember, even having conversations with recruits in the first fall, like I'd tell a recruit and their family something, they'd be like, well, and then they'd ask me the same thing over and over again. I'm like, look, I told you. They're like, well, we're just not used to that out here. Like we're used to, and I'm like, no, when we say something, you can take it to the bank. What that place taught me, because again, alignment with the people you're working with is vitally important in anything we do. And while the pressure cooker was going on, I was naive and oblivious to it, and it probably got to a point because again, I'm like, hey man, we were eliminating guys because the culture thing, and I don't want to share it publicly
yeah.
what was,
No, of course
but
not.
it was so I couldn't believe what I was seeing. And we're eliminating kids because I felt we had to, but yet it was taking on this narrative in the public that guys were leaving. And that was like my eye-opening experience to like the power of outside influences that can change a narrative. And it like hit me like a ton of bricks because in my mind, I'm like, man, I'm just the same guy that I was when but yet I would say there were times when I was literally like the most hated man in Phoenix. And I'm like, I'm not, if people know me
Yeah.
or would take the time. And so all of that, I wouldn't trade that for anything. In fact, when I spoke at that thing, I talked about that experience because what it taught me was even at some point giving in to this pressure or perceived pressure, I became somebody that was different than the guy that got me there. And I would never do that again. And so ultimately, when we ended up parting ways in 21, um, we weren't failing. It was kind of, but I remember getting up from the table and shaking my AD's hand and saying, look, we haven't failed. Like we're doing exactly what we set out to do. You have a different perception of that. But I was very proud when I walked out of that room. Now I'm 55 years old. That was the first time in my life when someone told me you're not good enough.
Right.
You know what I mean? And I don't know if you've ever experienced something like
Sure.
that when you're,
Yes.
yeah. And so I didn't know the toll it was taking on me until it was over. So,
Hmm.
and I remember having a physical reaction to all of the stress and whatever, and not knowing if I was ever going to coach again. But the one thing I said in my mind coming away from there was, if I ever coach again, I am going to be me.
Hmm.
Win, lose, or draw, I'm going to be me. And, now it comes to here. Yeah.
So on that note, obviously it took a little time. You get the Michigan job is in 22, but did you entertain like, hey, I could probably do some things in business, or I could do this, or I could retire, or I could
I
do
became a
consult, or I
CEO.
could do a pro manager,
Well, no, I wasn't, like I love baseball, but I never, we talk, I don't define myself as just a baseball guy. Like I'm
right.
always multifaceted. So like I'd sat on the board when, doing some things. I'm very active in the just figuring out the baseball space and travel ball and wanting to do good for the game. But I became a CEO of a company that was working in that space the year that I was out. But the thing that I did notice the year that I was out, back to me being the same person, was people were a little slower to return the phone call,
Yeah.
because you weren't in a position to do something for somebody else. I learned that the real world operates at an entirely different pace than the coaching world. Coaching world is immediate, whatever. And, that we don't have weekends. We've never had weekends. And,
Right.
and so my mind was still in that. But I love that year that I was out because I had still had some stuff contractually, so I didn't have to force myself into a
Right.
decision. But this thing came organically, and I'm like, oh man, I still love coaching. I still have a lot to offer. I don't know what's going to come. Now, I will say this. I mean, there were some smaller schools or whatever, and I was flattered that they were interested and very appreciative, but I knew myself well enough, having given everything that I've done. If I'm going to do this again, I in my mind, I felt like I got to go to a place that I can actually win a national championship. Like that's the
Mhm.
one thing I haven't done. And so when Michigan called, Michigan had been in the world, series, was one game away from a national championship in 2019. So I was like, oh, they can do it there. Eric Backage and I had become friends over the years, and I think he had a lot to do with recommending me. And I don't regret as painful as that was. Someone telling you no, you're not good enough. In my heart of hearts, I knew, but I wouldn't trade that experience for anything.
Yeah, you have. I mean, you're a fun guy to talk to because you're right. You don't. It's not the way to live life to look back and regret that. Nothing. You need to learn, right? And you learned. I got to be myself, and you hear that a lot of times, like in the NFL. A coach gets his first job, it doesn't work out, and he says every time, like, when I get my next gig, I'm going to be the guy I want to be, not the guy I thought I was supposed to be, right?
Yep.
Um, let's talk obviously just a little bit about Michigan, but I want to just ask a couple things about it. Do you have a coaching philosophy, a coaching style? I mean, I love your personality. So do you just try to run the program in the way that you're just your natural personality, or do you have a set like I want the culture to be this way. I have standards, I have rules. Is there something that you formally do, or is it just informal, if you will?
It's the standard piece. I'm glad I'm not the one that writes down 100 things and says these are the rules of our program. Like I'm more of the standards guy that we're going to model it every day. We're going to live it every day. Um, Even the self-reflection of 30 years of being a head coach. Like I'm a way different coach than I was. I was a head coach at age 30.
Yeah.
And and if I had coached in today's world the way that I coached back then, I probably wouldn't be employed right now. So I think you evolve time. But what I think even the ASU thing taught me too, because the year, even with COVID, and it's just funny about timing of life. Like we were preseason number 3 in the country. We had, 6 guys go in the top 4 rounds with the eventual 1-1. We had the first round. We didn't get to play with that team. So like, but I had measured and done all the stuff. Like we had a truly a championship caliber team. I was always saying, and doing it, you don't have to be an a-hole
Right.
to win at this level. Like you don't have to put on this air that I'm a tough guy and everybody's beneath me to win at this level. And I love that. So I'm still like, I get it all the time. Like I'll be talking to parents, I'll be talking to people, I'll run into somebody and I'll give them a tour of the stadium. They're like, wait a minute, wait, you're the head coach?
Right.
And I'm like, oh yeah, what do you mean? And I'm like, so I just try to like just build the organic, like we're gonna fill that locker room with talented baseball players, but that are just really good people. And that coaching staff is the same thing, and we're going to do it the right way. And, have I evolved? Yeah. Do I have a complex system? No, I like to keep it really simple. I say all the time, like this game's been around for hundreds of years. I know there's a lot of different ways to do it. You mentioned analytics and stuff
Yeah.
before. I think it's a blend. Um, but I try to keep things really, really simple.
So, two questions to follow up that. One is, um, how do you deal with, like, obviously the kids coming to Michigan that you're recruiting are going to be really good players. They're going to be really academic kids, and they're going to be really good character kids for sure. And how do you deal like the hardest part of coaching? I mean, I coached 30 years coaching pitchers. Very difficult in terms of you got 20 pitchers on the staff and you got your 7, 8 key guys and then you got some guys developing, but it's like managing their expectations. Is that a difficult part for you of like every dude's walking into Michigan going, I'm going to be the man and I'm going to help us win a national championship and play after college. Is that a big part of your job of like managing I guess what could be frustration or disappointment or
Yeah, but I think it goes to communication. It's like if you communicate all of that, again, I did a talk out there that week about, and we just went through jobs to be done. Like if you're very specific and you're making your specific ask of the players and you're communicating like, look, man, I know what you want to do. I know, but here's what we need you to do. It to me that puts the ownership because if there's deviation from that, you can always go back to that. That's the accountability piece. And so I just think the communication in that is key, but also drawing from just being a human and like your personal experience, going back to my playing career. Like when I was professional, I was the marginal guy.
Right.
So when I can sit a guy down and be like, look, man, I was you. I know what you're going through. I know how you want to contribute. And one of my favorite sayings, and I'd say this to guys all the time, is like, look, it's not always what you're not doing. It's just somebody's doing it a little bit better.
Right.
And is there a role for you? Absolutely. But I think if you don't communicate and constantly communicate, particularly with today's athlete you're dealing with, you're going to have trouble. And that's where, for me, I've had to make changes in my style. Early in my career, it was like, do this. Why? No, just do it. Now you have to put the why. And I have sons, all of my sons, all Power Five athletes. We talk all the time. Like I credit them a lot with my youngest is still in the coaching college.
Yes.
Is just listening to them because they're younger, they're kind of that demographic that I'm dealing with. And so I always try to stay current in what they're saying because they'll be people who love you are probably going to tell you the most truthful things ever. And so if my kids would ever go to dad, like, are you kidding me? You're a dork. Like, don't be doing that. Oh, well, I need to listen to that. You know what I mean? Because
Right,
they're telling
right.
me the truth. So,
Um, Couple more questions. One is like the modern world has changed a lot, right, with the portal and with NIL, et cetera. When I say those things to you, this modern world compared to the world you played in, you coached in for most of your time, are you, some are very I've had people on this podcast that are really at wit's end, and some that say, I'm just coaching kids and whatever the system is, I just want to help kids be the best version of themselves. Like, do you have complaints and maybe not, you don't want to air them on a podcast, but it's like, or do you say, hey, this is good what's happening? Or do you strike me as the kind of guy that just says, this is what it is, and I will do the best job I possibly can, given what's going on?
isn't that what it is? I mean,
Yeah.
I marvel at, I did a presentation out there on the social media thing, and
Yes.
I would cringe when I hear coaches be like, I hate it, they shouldn't do it, and they dig their heels in and they don't embrace it. I'm like, but that is the world we're living in. How
Right.
can you not do that? So my attitude with is if I were to draw it up in a perfect scenario of like baseball, would I put it this way? Probably not. But it's not going away. That's why I always tell guys, it's like it's not going away. So you can either sit here and spend all of your energy trying to talk about what's wrong with college baseball and the state of college athletics and blah, 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 or be like, you know what? We got to figure out a way to navigate through this for the betterment of our kids, our program, and honestly for yourself personally. And when I just don't understand, but that's part of the evolution, and that's where I feel I'm proud of kind of how I've evolved. And if you talk to my players, every year, and these guys, I was talking to Schwarber a couple of days ago, and I, you're soft now, Skip. No, it's just I evolve. I mean, you probably heard that too. Every year that goes by, it's like you're soft. No, it's just you're looking at it through a different lens now. But I don't have a complaint with the new system because it is what it is. And if you really want to look at it from a business standpoint, this is what I tell people too. It's like, why should you ever begrudge these kids? The NCAA, for all its greatness, has built a multi-billion-dollar business off
Huge,
essentially slave labor. So,
basically.
I'm big on the free market. I think, is it a perfect system right now? No, but I think people are trying. But I'll say it again and I'll stand behind. It's not going away.
Right.
This is not going
No.
away.
Let me
So,
follow up that with something else because I'm sitting here in my little home office and I'm looking out and I see a lot of snow. I don't know if you got snow on the ground in Michigan, but it's,
yes.
yes, okay. So, and I haven't coached for 3 years and I miss so many things about it. The one thing I don't miss, and you mentioned it earlier, is I don't miss working my weekends. That's the best part of my new life. But I do still miss coaching. What I also kind of don't miss is like my buddy's going skiing, and I'm plowing a field to get ground balls in for the infield. So I've heard it recently. Eric, who you mentioned is a friend of yours, is on the bandwagon of pushing the season back a couple of weeks. Do you mind commenting on that of what you think?
100% right. He's 100% right. Every rationale, I mean, this logic, and I'll tell you a little story with that. I won't give you names, but when I was in the Pac-12, Eric had zoomed into our coaches meeting. And and here I am. I mean, I've been in that environment for 18 years, and that was the world I was coming from.
Yep.
And here I am now in a room with the advantage of all the things that we used to rail against from the whatever. And Eric zooms in, gives this unbelievable presentation, super thought out, very rational. And if you were to take it at face value, you'd be like, it's a no-brainer. We absolutely should do that. But as soon as the presentation was over and he zoomed off, voices in the room were like, nope, we're good.
Right.
And and for obvious reasons, the selfish part of the advantage. And so I think if college baseball and college athletics in general would say, if we really want to do what's in the best interest of the sport, we have no decision but to move the season back. Like what other sport is this geographically skewed? But I unfortunately, it's human nature that people are going to hang on to what gives them the advantage. But we're going to have to take it's going to be some strong leaders in those positions, in some of those conferences, in those positions to say, you know what? Yeah, it's our advantage, but is that really the best thing for the sport of baseball, college
No.
baseball?
Agreed. Totally agreed. All right, two last ones for you. One you may not want to share, but this was a cool thing you were talking about at Mohegan. It was more kind of personal. You might have done it in the boardroom with other people, but you have a son that's coaching college football at Oregon. Do you mind talking about your trip out there and what you learned by being kind of sitting in on some of the stuff going on with Oregon football?
Yeah, well, just Dan Lanning, who I think is one of the best in the business at everything. Like, and we talk about the role of a coach now in any sport. You're a CEO, you got your athletes you're dealing with, but you got all these entities that you have to deal with. I was just fascinated to his organization, his energy level that he puts in, but sitting in that meeting, um, I loved because we're always as coaches trying to figure out. We talked earlier about the marginal player and like trying to keep them engaged because only 8 guys are on the field at a time in baseball. Your pitcher makes it 9. So you got all these other bodies that have to be happy. And he went through the team meeting and it was fascinating to very organized going down through and the respect and the kids, the attention. Well, then they split up into their organizational meetings. And so I happened to stay on the special teams meeting. And, and I was like, okay, this is kind of cool how they organize that, but then how they celebrate that
Hmm.
with they would give out awards in that. And Dan actually there was an open seat. He came up and sat next to me. So we're watching, and they have this thing where it's almost like Marriott points. Like if they do different things, it elevated their status within the team on what I would say in baseball would be the equivalent of the bench guys for us, the special teams, because they're not getting all this stuff. So
Right.
I tapped him on the leg. I was like, "Hey man, like what is this? Like what are you doing here?" And he took me through. He goes, "Well, this is kind of like modeled after the Marriott, where if they do certain things, they get an award, they can hang, and then it gives them they can move to the front of the line on meals or how they travel and stuff." And I thought, that is absolutely brilliant to celebrate those areas of your program that don't often get celebrated on the field publicly. And my mind went right to my bench. Is like, how can I get that concept into my bench? And then, but that one really stood out. And just to see we're organizing in baseball, eventually it will be 34 guys when our rosters are down, but to take those hundreds of individuals and watch how meticulously they organize it to a minute is really, really impressive.
And it's something that struck me as you were saying that too. I would imagine at the level of an Oregon football, you've got certain kids on the team that become nationally famous, and then you got other kids in the team who are like putting in all the work and not getting anything. So it seems like he's trying to win at the highest level, but he's trying to keep the esprit de corps of the whole group up too.
But like, yeah, I mean, how do you make those things important? back to when you asked me about how do we do things in our managers for me are like that. Like I try to put those kids up on a pedestal. We have female and male managers, and they're coming to practice every day. They're not getting, but how do you celebrate that? Well, you highlight it, you
Right.
celebrate it, you praise it, you constantly roll that out to your team about this is a team member just as much as. And I think those are the things that I a little bit gets lost in college athletics because when we grow up and we run companies and whatever, I mean, that's what you're celebrating every single employee, not the one that's just bringing you the highest revenue. And I think that goes to morale, that goes to culture, all of the things.
Yeah, well said. All right, last thing then is Mohegan Sun that you came out to that event sponsors this. And so I always do a little Mohegan Sun segment. And I wanted to ask you, this is not, sometimes I prep people on this, but I don't think you need the prep, which is if you were to tell, high school version of Tracy Smith or a younger kid in high school that wants to, that's trying his best to succeed to be able to become a college baseball player, is there one or two things, could be on the field, off the field, physically, mentally, that you say, hey, you got to put focus on this? This has got to be a key thing if you want to get to that next level.
Um, so first of all, even back to that event, like I didn't know that event existed until I came out to it and I was blown away with it. But just even standing, like I look at myself as still that guy, that youngster from Kentland, Indiana, that is so friggin' lucky every day. And I remember going to my first conventions and seeing, the legendary coaches, whether it's Skip Berkman or walking around and I'm like looking at them in awe. Oh my God. Like and I would call my wife and be like, hey man, I just ran this elevator with, now it's funny, not that I'm even putting myself on that level, not even close, but the young coaches back to that event that came up to me that weekend, and I'm kind of like, flashing back to 30 years ago, but the questions they would ask, and I think sometimes I would shock them on, it's not always just the baseball stuff. It's the hire the good people. You can teach them anything. You're going to be spending so much time as a coach away from your family, like have your family
Right.
involved in. That's our give back. That's the one thing we can give back our kids and our family is give them this unique experience. I would get letters from the state every year when I was in Indiana about my kids missing so much school because I'd have them travel with us. And I was like, you know what? They're learning more on these trips than they're going to sit and learn into the thing. So, I think just building your organization with the quality people is number one. And then, there's more than one ways to skin a cat on all the technique on how to turn a double play and all of that stuff. And that's why, um, when I came out to speak at that, I said, I don't want to talk about turning a double play.
Right, right, right.
I don't want to talk about because I want to talk about things that are different and that are even permeating our sport now. But even back to the little bit of the social media stuff, I would encourage coaches to get involved in that because that's the very demographic that we're coaching. And even if, you could be trying to do your messaging to them and that isn't really the reason you're doing it, it just shows them you care
Right.
because you're trying to learn their thing. And what do we always say in coaching? They're not going to care what you know until they know you care. Well, if even just trying to get into their world a little bit, that's coaching. You know what I mean? And you know this too. There's how many great guys that know baseball upside down and backwards, the best that have ever been, but yet they can't have a conversation with an athlete to disseminate that knowledge.
Right.
Like that's just for me is like these are people. It doesn't matter going back to whether you're coaching high school. And I'm getting long-winded, but I remember my really good friend of mine, Butch Carter, coached in the NBA, coached the Toronto Raptors at the time. I'm riding with him, but he had coached my brother-in-law at Middletown High School. And I remember saying to Butch, I'm like, Butch, man, like, how is it now coaching in the NBA? Like, is it just, he goes, Tracy, he goes, I'm using the same lesson plans that I used at Middletown High School that I do in the NBA.
Mm.
And so that's what I would tell coaches is like, you know what to do. This game isn't that complex. It's the simplicity of that. But I think our nuances are being able to communicate and getting kids to believe in and be the best version of themselves. And that isn't always the technical part of teaching a swing. And, so that's what I would say.
Yeah, and certainly I'll give out when I I have like some show notes. I'll give out all the stuff about Michigan and your social media. But listen, that is a way in this modern world that a kid can get to know a little bit about you and the program that they never would have been able to get 10 years and further back. So I think it's letting people know who you are, and it's letting them know about the program in a very easy, cool, fun way. I watch all your stuff.
Well, but even back to that, I did that a lot at Indiana, pre-Instagram and TikTok. I was doing that, and then back to the version of I went to ASU and they shut me down.
Mm,
And
interesting.
yeah, and I remember it really bothered me at the time, but I was like, oh, okay, well, I'll shut it down. But it goes back to that, like I became somebody that I really wasn't.
Right.
And so, yeah, I don't do it. I hear all the naysayers and whatever, but when it is, there's not been one negative with it.
Yeah.
Not one. I mean, with the even at that convention, the 60-year-old coming up and saying, you know what, you've given me the confidence to dive into their world. I'm like, you know what? That's a win. If there's one mind that was changed, that's a win.
Yeah, exactly. All right, Coach, you're the man. I'm so glad that we got to meet. I think we're at least of the same,
Yeah.
genre. So,
Yeah.
I did look at some pictures of you. I think it was at Arizona State. I don't know if there's gray in there. You had a little beard going at
Oh,
some point.
I could rock a big one. And on that Zoom I was with earlier with Coach McDonald and Thompson, they were both sporting the beards. And I'm like, you know what? I missed the boat, man. I shaved mine off. I should have. You're
Right.
the third person. Yeah.
At least while it's cold, it's a little face jacket, for a little
No,
while. But
no, but I had a big one at ASU.
yeah. All right, Coach. I appreciate your time so much. Thank you.
Loved it.
Thank you all so much for listening to this episode of the Game Plan Podcast. It wouldn't be possible without an audience, and I thank you for joining. Hope you enjoyed this episode today with Tracy Smith from the University of Michigan. Really fun conversation, and I look forward to seeing you on our next episode. According to the release schedule, it should be Matt Reynolds, head baseball coach at Wesleyan. Thank you so much.